It's very difficult to discuss what was done to me and what happened, part because Hollywood loaded it with so many multifaceted lenses of interpretation, which themselves play out as a form of doctrine or competing doctrines. The way issues of war and peace play out as competing doctrines. We have to look at history and um, notions that are long established that may have only very recently been being questioned. But I was attacked, and I was just a child. I was 11, 12 years old, and I went deaf. It was a terrible misfortune. We moved to get away from the nightmare that I was being put through. But my parents didn't ask any questions about what had happened to me, and I didn't have the language skills to discuss what happened. When I was in my 20s, for example, late 20s, living in Montana, there was a girl, a sweet girl, who I wanted to marry, but I think she realized that I hadn't confronted my past. I had unearthed the letters, which, for the lack of interest it is shown in such important letters, must have been written by senior administrators like the Biden administration and the predecessors. At the time when I got them, it was probably Nixon who was in office, time of Watergate, and the psychological ramifications involved in secret taping and the psychiatric break-in of Daniel Ellsberg and all of these overlapping themes. So it's that kind of what Greg Carl wrote about it as a conspirator behind it, the bewildering myriad of surface details that arrive at the fundamental themes. Well, there's very competing fundamental themes, but one of them is metaphor. If you deafen a child, you're making a metaphor for the silent scream. The spiritual deafness of the humanist. I was the child of a humanist, which is another metaphor. So when I was attacked, it was like the life being attacked in the womb. In the poetry of this circle, this what they call an esoteric circle. Now, the University of Pittsburgh has the Vienna Circle visiting them. They have many of the most important manuscripts of the Vienna Circle. And Charlie Aston, the rare book librarian, the rare archives librarian for the University of Pittsburgh, was around a lot in my childhood. He took me to the film um, frightening film, Night of the Living Dead, and we were supposed to see Cabinet of Dr. Calgary, but they gave the film a slip, and instead it was Charlie Chan. And a lot of things get given the slip in that circle. Shulman was arrested for stealing $8 million worth of books and selling them plausibly through a Trumpy-tune conduit. So, there were things I was never advised. I was kept in the dark. And when you keep a child in ignorance, and batter them. That's called comprachios. It's a slight form of slavery. And of course, the black headhunters of the West Coast thought it was hilarious that a little white boy was being used for um, sexual slavery. So there's sociological ramifications to what was ultimately done to me, which was to torture me and put me in the prison of Parkinson's disease for the final call of grave cruelty that they have been charting since Yoko Ono first attacked me in grade school, which is who was clearly behind all of this. There's things that can't be explained by any other explanation. For example, the effigy of Gail Burstyn is on the cover of a Robert Fripp record in 1979. That's the name of the girl who wrote the letters. So what happened was that they would wait for me and they were burning hatred in their eyes, murder. They had tortured me, battered me, kicked me in the head, slaughtering blows blindside, exhibited weapons, made death threats, and entrapped me in child sex, kidnapped me in stolen cars. There was clearly great intensity, and some of them were adults with reputations for being felons, and they were waiting for me every day. I was found wandering in the snow by them because I was too afraid to go to school. I told the school that I was afraid I was going to be killed, and they laughed at me. And to this day, the NAACP says it was a provincial norm. My mother covers for them by saying that drugs were everywhere in those days, and that's Yoko Ono's point of view. This was a John Lennon fan club. Well, it's hardly untrue, I guess, when you consider that the Psychiatric Division for Attica State Prison were promoting all of this. Wattenmaker was his name. He's named in the script. But aside from liking some of the music, which I guess a lot of people did, and most people did, I wasn't really all that big a fan of those, which may have been what caused the problem because they accept nothing but knee scraping. And they laid out a doctrine about how the story was going to be told that has no bearing whatsoever to the truth. Now, they set up a genocide warrant based on sex. They consider it a form of psychology. Sex is no, no. You're not supposed to do that. So when it becomes lethal, you have only yourself to blame. And they pulled that and got away with it. Nobody pursued the information that people who used a nerve agent on me as a child set up a Venus flytrap with the girl with tattooed the Grim Reaper on her inner thigh pointing at her vagina, and needle tracks, which could only mean high risk threat. You prove that you believe in sex by dying for it. This is some sort of Bush operation that involved Peter Gabriel, who said it was an experience park. In other words, we're going to subject you to AIDS, to the death of Parkinson's, as a theme story about what Louis Lapham called a cautionary story. There were people telling me that Antonio Negri had been used by a right wing guerrilla group in Italy, a left wing guerrilla group in Italy. And they followed him and manipulated what he wrote to use for and he was arrested. There was a book that came out called Lucretia's Dreams about the way the um, Inquisition interrogated a woman named Lucretia because her dreams were said to have portended the disaster of the Spanish Armada. And so this idea of using dream theory, which came from Brian Eno and his friendship with Putin, was put together by the royal class back in World War One. They had this idea. They started developing this plan. And of course, in those days, threat to the ecology of the whole planet was not seen as human potential. So war was like if you were trying to reason with people about the mentality of war, you were seen as a moralizer who was demoralizing your army. And you should be tried for treason for trying to demoralize the army with your pacifist talk. But more and more people have come to realize that that mentality is truly threatening the entire planet, and we can't afford that. But there are scripts put into place that people feel need to be told or would be told by a diplomatic regime that completely bypass the truth of the attacks that were visited on me. So It's removed carefully from history, the way Peter Gabriel used me anonymously to tell his drama club story on the album. So with the praise, the voodoo doctor handling the sharks, the men exploiting Tony Negri for fulfillment of Lucretia's dreams and so forth. And the psychotics around Yoko Ono, who pretend this is about, John Lennon's death being the guru of the flock who they claim to represent and soothsay. And that's a lot of ugliness. And the state of Washington lured me here, saying with the words like enough but not enough. In other words, um, how'd you like a little more fire, Scarecrow? They were escalating, one poison after another. And Ringo Starr's gang was saying how it was all so innocent. They were just theme parking the AIDS epidemic, but they poisoned me in the mouth right before COVID. That's so innocent. The strange case of Greta Thunberg is that she's speaking up for the earth, true. And one has to be very accepting and admiring of her doing that. But she scolds people who do anything else. Well, it turns out that that's her generation's challenge. The generation when I was in my 20s, the most immediately horrifying thing was the AIDS attack. Oh, you should accept that because of ecology was not something anybody was really saying, except maybe Amanda Harcourt, who said the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So John Lennon was the metaphor for saving the planet. And I was wrong to investigate was their moral code. The persona is subjected to successive degradations of the X motive, wrote Greg Carl. Well, it seemed to me that somebody should investigate these people who'd kidnapped, tortured, brutally gassed me. They put paint thinner on a rag and put it in a paper bag and forced me to put it over my mouth while on a horrifyingly powerful hallucinogen at the age of 11 or 12 years old, and maybe 13. But it was horrifying, locked in a garage with these people speaking to me in tongues. I was somebody who, as a child, was said to be a picky eater, my mother called me. She never told me to eat to become strong. And I was afraid of strong foods, things that were too spicy, carbonated beverages I wouldn't touch. And this was like, imagine Greta Thunberg at the time when she was having trouble eating, being kidnapped and molested and forced on inhalants. Then you're supposed to just snap out of that. You're supposed to understand everything that's going on. Or Noam Chomsky's going to work you over with interrogation systems that are undreamed of in terms of invasion. Then you'll be burned alive by the Seattle left with Parkinson's. I mean, put yourself in my shoes, Ms. Thunberg. So that's the reality of it. I didn't even weigh 100 pounds when they attacked me. And they're making it out to be, oh, I should have been this intellectual giant. They compare me to Midori Goto because she was a world class prodigy. Why shouldn't he be judged by the standards of a sheltered and protected and cared for and talked to world class prodigy when they gas him semi conscious and beat him into chair and he's hiding in the towel closet? Anybody who goes to 1228 Wilmington can confirm that it was big enough for a child to go up into the towel closet and hide. They say, don't say like Anne Frank, because Gail Burstyn, the perpetrator behind all of this, was Jewish. And so it's not sacred to say like Anne Frank, he hid in the towel closet. Yeah, they had a guy, literally, a black guy from the ROTC, a drone warrior of the Obama breed, barking at me, don't say like Anne Frank. I know it's meant to be like Anne Frank. One of them used to snarl, top shelf, oh, ho, ho. One of the Israelis. So it's difficult to explain what happened. Like there were metaphors from the drama club. Sean Brooks locked me out of a church and then made off with the woman who threw a tomato at me. I mean, it seems to me that like when you look at the Muslim world, it's not liberals who look at, relatively safe in pornography who are out to hurt them because they don't take the issue into trafficking. We're not like drone bombing them. We're trying to make peace with them. And just to each his own when it comes to how people live. But the drone bombers say that people like us are the threat because of the implicit sniveling that attends sexual psychology. And so there's a lot of deviant activity. I mean, the people who actually were the adults trafficking me, people like Donald Rostro, were Jay Epstein type crowd types. Adult really brutalized me who were pedos. And they had songs like Flame Over Africa. And they, of course, did covers of Yoko Ono's trash. And these people were supposed to be heroized because they admit that they're disgustos. And if I don't admit I'm a disgusto, I'm not, I'm Putin's hero of the story. And that means that the Black Panthers get to burn me alive. Now, I don't want to say that the Black Panthers per se set up the situation where I got Parkinson's because it was the Green Party system. Although they can be led by people as a subterfuge who are in black society, that is subterfuge. These are right wingers from the Trumpy to Putinese working together against the whole school public educators. None of them stuck by me. None of them stuck up for me. And they say the reason is because I was pursuing the successive degradations of the X motive. Well, that you have to investigate undercover to find out what's going on. Human traffickers are very shifty and elusive, and it's very difficult to penetrate those kinds of crime rings. To be sabotaged from above the way I was is shocking. I mean, the whole time that they were setting up bombings and murders and knifings and medical violence, they were calling themselves Amnesty International. I mean, Maduro Goto was playing two virgins pussy ball of a nightmarish chauvinistic direction for the Rolling Stones in the name of John Lennon while being a United Nations peace ambassador. And you can tell from the pictures in the New York Yankees magazine where Ichiro has Mac on his collar that they poisoned me, that they really did. They burned me alive. They intended for me to get Parkinson's. Now, they were using terms like Howard Lincoln used the term Milquetoast, which means coward. We're going to milk you until you're toast, is the subtext of this Eno language.